Hi, I'm Tyler Posey, and I'm proud to be Latino.
You have to want this, because they're gonna keep coming at you. They're gonna keep knocking you down, and you have to get back up.
Recently, I was at Universal Studios. We were eating, and this waiter comes up to me, and at the very end, he's like, "Hey man, so I wanted to bite my tongue, but what you did on Teen Wolf, being a Latino lead, really, really, really inspired me, and I looked up to you so much that if you could do it and represent our culture, that I maybe could too." And it was one of those stereotypical moments that you hear of like people inspiring people like them to do what we do, to do what I was doing, and to grab the life by the balls and make a difference. And it really stuck with me and struck me. And I have moments of it bursting out of me in ways that I wouldn't really expect. And I love it. I think it's really, really, really fun and interesting and great. And yeah, it's I do feel like I'm craving it.
I'll tell you I'm happy. Isn't that what I'm supposed to say?
The transition into music was always in my mind. I always was doing both. It just wasn't advertised that much, and then I did Warped Tour, played Warped Tour, and then got on this awesome label, Big Noise. They've just supported me and helped me a lot. And then the pandemic happened, so we weren't really able to go out there and tour. But so it's exciting. This is an exciting time. It's still pretty early in the stages of me branching out and becoming a credible professional musician. But I've always been doing it. It's always been in my mind. There have been moments where I wanted to play music more than act, but now I really want to do both equally. Give it all 100%. In my next EP, I want to mix mariachi and punk music. It just sounds really interesting, and I really wanted to kind of mess with that a little bit, just to give you a little roots history there, a little culture. The song ties into my EP, and the EP is called Drugs, and it's basically a life and death story of addiction and how I got sober. And so Past Life encompasses the entire EP, where it talks about my past life when, I was not so happy and an addict and needed help. And so it kind of tells you an entire story of how I became an addict. There's mentions of me being a kid in the business and me feeling isolated and not connected to anything. And so in order to get connected, I turned to substances and depression and whatever, that kind of story. And but then, there's a happy ending at the end of it. And I've been through some really serious stuff my entire life. And I just try to approach things with not a very serious attitude, only when it's necessary. And so I'm hoping that music video can make people laugh. And that's really all it is. That's what my whole life is. I'm trying to make people feel good and laugh and feel safe. I grew up going to my grandparents' house all the time on my mom's side. My mom's Mexican, and there was constant menudo being made, mariachi music playing all the time. They really embraced the culture. But, at the same time, I grew up in Santa Clarita, which is predominantly white, and there's definitely a lot of Latinos in Santa Clarita. My high school was, filled with Latinos, but growing up, I wasn't really exposed to that in my hometown. And so, there was definitely two sides of me. There was the Mexican side, and then there was the white side. And it didn't really, I wasn't ridiculed. It wasn't hard for me to find my place. I just exercised both parts of me in different areas. I did feel sort of typecasted a little bit when I was a kid, but I was proud of it. I didn't feel like I was like, oh man, I would really like not to want to play some Mexican roles right now. They were great. I played Jennifer Lopez's son in Maid of Manhattan. I want to represent everything. I want to represent my, the Mexican side, because that does need a little bit more love. So it's, I definitely want to keep representing. We do try to get ethnically powerful and portray ethnicity as the leads in a lot of our shows. There's always going to be room for it and new ways to portray it. First generations, second generations. I want to see movies about all these different types of people because they're all interesting and they all have a different story. My first movie that I ever fell in love with was The Desperado, with Antonio Banderas. I was 5 years old watching him blow people's heads off. I have such a passion for that movie. One, it's really cool, but it was in a way ahead of its time because there weren't a lot of leads back then doing that in Mexico, speaking Spanish. But I didn't know at the time was that I was like, wow, that guy looks like me. I didn't know why I fell in love with it. But yeah, I really was inspired by that because it was badass. There's always room for that. In terms of coming up next, my goals, I want to start some sort of foundation, charity to help anti-bullying, help for addiction, suicide, LGBTQ, any minority. I just want people to feel safe to be themselves and safe to come to a place for help. So I definitely want to be a person that does tangible things in improving the world. Going to be putting out a mariachi X-punk record at some point. I'm writing a lot of films. I'm going to be, making my own films, directing soon. I've got cartoons coming out that I voice on Netflix. I've got a movie coming out at some point, and just going to keep doing what I love, which is being creative in any way possible and try to somehow help make the world a safer place.